right, David Donaldson here with Joe Martin on another episode of Entrepreneurial Impact. And today we're going to talk a little bit about traditional manager versus leadership. What does that mean to you, Joe?
I think it's funny. You got like words that intertwine. You have, I think, based on everybody's background and like what they were raised in and experiences, words have meanings and correlations. So you have like words that will hit people. You know, when you hit like ego on somebody, most people have a negative reaction to ego because it negatively says I portray that I'm egotistical, right? But we all have some level of ego, which actually drives our confidence, and also some standards on things. But I think that's where it comes into, like, with word choice, you have boss, manager, leader, C-suite, executive, whatever title, because we like titles, mainly because titles put people in boxes. And I don't say people in boxes to limit people's capacity, but like if you just say, I'm a leader or I'm a manager, there's some cognitive understanding that people follow, or you have some type of title or some type of control. But if you just say, like, I'm a team member or I'm a person, it doesn't define the situation very well. And in our world, because humans operate better in black and white, having titles clarify role, purpose, and position. But I think when you talk about manager and leader, manager typically has more of a control.
Yeah.
Leader has more of an influence. And I honestly, on my personal side, I don't know how you feel about this, Dave, but when I hear manager, I hear control. And when I hear leader, I hear influence and growth. And when I hear manager, it's more of control and sometimes finite situations.
Getting things done through others. That's leadership, right? Getting things done. Not telling you that you've done something, but getting things done through you. Right?
Yeah. I think besides those like word choices and when they hit me when I hear someone talk about it, the other thing I think about is, I believe a manager is a oversight of process, system, widgets, and I think a leader has more to do with the influence and development of people. Because I think you need to be an effective business operator. You have to have leadership skills and you have to have management skills. Yeah. But you cannot grow a business as a traditional manager where you're controlling everything. You have to control the goal, maybe the metrics, maybe the process, because you want to have quality control, right? Like, for instance, you're running a restaurant, you want to make sure that that soup or that steak or that fish comes out perfect every time, right? This is like the benefit of...
Please be the temperature. Let's just start there. It seems very important, right?
Exactly. And that's a process. So you can manage the education and training of a person around a process to put out a product, right? But when you're trying to say, why is this chef in my kitchen? It's because I can make you a better chef through my education and training. I can get you to open up your own restaurant. I can get you to understand how to run a kitchen, how to hire, and how to retain your line cooks, to your sous chefs, to your front, the front of house, all that type of thing. So like there's a development side that a leader brings, but they also bring a management around process. And I think you need to have both. But when you hear I'm a traditional manager or I'm a leader, those are two different things.
Absolutely. Right. And I think it's at its core, a manager will make decisions. So this is the direction we're going to go. Versus a leader gets input or feedback from others around. Now, he may have an idea of where he thinks he wants it to go and has the overriding vision for that. But without the support of everybody else in the organization or the team or whomever is that internal leadership group with you, right? Their say matters. And how you're going to get there is not going to be without them. Just because you say, hey, we're driving here, doesn't necessarily that's where you're going to end up.
Yeah, I think the first piece here, you got traditional, good segue. You have a traditional manager that feels totally responsible for the success of the team.
Yeah.
And you have a leader that's sharing responsibility with the team and serves the team, right? Because here's the thing. If I have no ownership in the outcome or I have no authorship in the process, I could care less, right? Like, think about this, those of you in leadership positions, right? That when you just tell somebody what to do and it doesn't work, they inevitably go back to you and say, well, Joe, you told me to do this and it didn't work, right? Or they self-sabotage and say, well, I'll hear the lip service and I'll pocket veto what Joe told me, and then I'll do it my way just because I didn't believe in his way of doing it, so I just never did it, or I did it subpar, right? So the first part about here is that in the effort of the traditional manager to feel totally responsible for the whole success of the team, one, the scale is wrong because you can't do that.
Right.
And and this is part of giving up control, which I believe most managers have a challenge with, is that you don't actually share the responsibility with the team and then serve the team to do the best that they can to hit that goal. Because you're actually trying to get them to understand why they're here, what's in it for them, and how they are actually responsible for part of this process. And if you don't slow down enough to show that out, you're not going to get commitment when you're just dictating and you feel that you're responsible for the whole process.
Yeah, that's hard sometimes. A lot of times, right? Because you're passionate and how you see yourself, right? You've been tasked to do something. So therefore you automatically take on the burden. And yes, sometimes you can just do it and get it done the way that you want to, but without that, it really does relieve the stress. Like I think a lot of times of what keeps you up at night about what gets done and what doesn't get done and how it's getting done and who's doing it. But if you haven't properly communicated the message or gotten to buy-in everybody, that's what's going to happen. But if everybody has that vision and that buy-in together, you're going to sleep a little bit easier at night, theoretically.
I think that the next point here is this: traditional managers think they have to have the answers to all concerns and problems because that is their job, whereas a leader teaches how to think and lets them solve their own problems. I think this is the biggest part about what you're talking about with control, is that because I'm all-knowing and I know everything, like all the information is held with me, which a lot of people that are traditional manager mindsets will do that for job security.
Yeah,
well, I can't get rid of Dave because he's got all this information. Or the opposite effect happens where the person creates so much complexity in their role that they externally people think that, wow, we can't get rid of this person because they're just so difficult, where simplicity matters. I think the cool part about the aspect of a leader is that if you're teaching how to think and lets them solve their own problems, you have the ownership in the situation by the employee or team member, because they know it's on them to figure it out. And if you're teaching somebody how to think, you're showing them growth, but you're also getting them to see a different perspective on how they can get to the outcome. And I think that's what most people want, is that they've never been challenged with their thought process. And most people want to be independent. They want to know that they're self-sufficient. They want to know that they are empowered and confident to run their lives. I don't know about you, but I never want to wake up and feel powerless or disempowered. It's a terrible way to live.
Yeah.
And that's what I think when a traditional manager comes in, it's like, you need me to survive. I don't want anybody around me that needs to survive because of my existence. Right? Because then it's not scalable. I actually haven't taught people how to be the best version of themselves in that role. And I haven't systematized the entire business operation, that you're basically on one contingent plan or one death away from the thing imploding. That's not cool.
Yeah, I think there's also how you're perceived, or how you perceive yourself, to, because you have a title, you have a role, and maybe that you automatically assume, or it is assumed that you have all the answers.
Yep.
You may or may not. More likely not. Right? But then it's okay to understand and let it be known that I don't have all the answers, but collectively we can figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Which goes into the third point, is just like a traditional manager tries to maintain control of the outcome from a position of authority and assume knowledge. Here's what I've learned in life. There is a book called Thinking in Bets, all right? And when managers think they can control the outcome from their position and authority of knowledge, here's what they're missing. That there is so much stuff that happens in the world that we have no control over, and luck plays into it. And what I mean by that is, think about this. Think about the last time you hit a home run, in a deal, or you just knocked it out of the park, you crushed your goal, or you crushed the project, or whatever the thing was that you thought you weren't going to be able to do. Here's what happens. You think to yourself, well, I've got such great skills, and my scripts are amazing, and I planned so well, and the business offering was so great, I did all of it, and that's why they chose me. But if you don't get that deal, or you don't close that project, you immediately go to what was out of my control. The things that I couldn't handle. Oh, it's because of this or because of that. So we afford way more impact on our successes around our gifts and that we earned it. And we don't put the same amount of focus on our weaknesses when we lose something. And what happens is there's a little bit of luck in everything. And what I believe leaders understand is that there's certain things out of our control. So we don't want to control people or outcomes. We want to have self-leadership and accountability. That we want to be able to realize that like in 40 hours, 60 hours a week, I can't micromanage any of my team members because I hired them to do a role that would leverage me into a higher dollar per hour activity. So my goal is self-development, not constantly controlling the person, because if I'm constantly controlling the person, why did I hire you?
Yeah.
Right? And who wants to be in that role? Think about it, the employee. Like, flip that one. Like, could you imagine being like, yeah, I took this job because I kind of liked it. I kind of like operations, or I kind of like tech, or whatever the thing is that you liked about it. And then all of a sudden you're like, yeah, I could make an impact, and I could fix things, I could innovate, and I could make things better. Like, most people that are effective like to see that. And then all of a sudden I joined the organization, and my boss is literally doing my job for me and dictating exactly how I'm going to do everything.
You're stymieing growth. Right? Then that all that energy just gets sucked out of the room. That person now is just showing up.
Yeah.
Right? He's an empty chair, but he's showing up. But he's like, okay, Joe.
Yeah.
It's your show.
Mm-hmm.
Where do we go? Versus, okay, let's get this thing on the road, right? So I agree, right? So when we look at those things, we're saying like how, I think it's a perfect segue. If communicating information to individuals at certain levels versus creating a climate of open and consistent communication where team members stay informed. I think back, there's a quote, I'm going to butcher this completely, but I love history, and I actually love George Washington, like what he was able to it just moves me, right? I know you're a Lincoln guy, and I am too, but with George Washington, when I think about this, people always said, hey, George Washington, what an amazing leader, right? Look what he did. But he has basically said, look, I wasn't a leader. I wasn't the smartest guy in the room, but I surrounded myself with leaders who were, right? So he understood how to communicate that vision and get the most out of everybody else and let them do what they do best. And he led them to be their best selves. Or he found the people that could.
I think that goes, when you talk about communication, then there's also consulting. And as a traditional manager, you're talking about making decisions without consulting the team, and whereas a leader will consult individuals and teams. And I think what's cool about that topic here between a manager and leader is I had one of my mentors at the time say, hey, after you give a presentation or after you teach or after you have a meeting, I hate the word should because it always shame. He's like, I'd encourage you to reach out to individuals that were in the meeting or the training or whatever and ask for their advice. And I say advice, another tidbit on word choice, right? Not manager and leader. But when you ask for feedback or opinion, 9 times out of 10, someone's going to go negative with it and they're going to give you all the complaints. If you say, hey, can you give me some advice? They're typically going to go positive and they're going to give you solutions. So as I say that, he said, let me give you some advice. You should reach out to your team that was on that group call and ask for their advice. What went well? What should I do different? Because here's what's going to happen. You're going to get ideas from other people that actually are very insightful to make your meetings better, your trainings better, or your events better. And then you're also going to hear the stuff they don't care about so you can cut the fat out of it. And what also happens is you build a connection as a relationship level with that individual because now they just realize that the supervisor, the leader, reached out to them for advice on how to make the thing better, which means that you value my opinion. So you're actually building another relationship tier in the leadership realm because you asked for their insights.
I think when you look at it that way, as a leader, what you're recognizing is that you need your people more than they need you. Yeah. And you're allowing them that feedback, and you're recognizing that I can't do this without you. So give me the feedback. What was your wins? What did you hear? That's kind of what you're getting out of that, because really, you get there. I'm not gonna say that your favorite platitude, but you don't get there alone, right? And you need those people, and you need the right people.
This one's an if. When it talks to like problems, solutions, manager owns the problems and determines solutions to problems and gives them to the team. Now, whereas a leader doesn't own the problem, they facilitates an individual or team involvement in solving the problems, and then holds the team or individual accountable to solve the problems. I think what's interesting around this one is you're constantly pushing back to the team for authorship around opportunities, challenges, whatever it faces, because it gets them committed to the organization and what they're working on. And you want commitment. And if someone is always saying it's always mine, because then I also see these managers run around, I work so hard, I do all these things, I've got all this, I can't get any more time, I'm bought, and then things are the bottleneck. Well, the person that thinks they're valuable because they do all these things but never actually teach, never actually leverage, never actually give it to others, they're actually ego. It's actually an ego-driven situation because they feel that nobody else is good enough to do it.
Yeah.
Right? Or they're so control-minded that they fear relinquishing these opportunities because they feel that they will no longer be valuable in the organization.
And that just ties back to the vision again. Like, you can have a vision, you can understand where you're going. It could even be your idea. This could change everything. But at the end of the day, you only get there with the team. You don't get there because of yourself.
Correct. I think this is also very insightful about facilitates individual or team involvement in solving the problem and holds the team or individual accountable to solve their problem. Here's what typically happens is when you have a team that's newly formed or you're transitioning, taking over a team, when there's not accountability at the team member level, you run into deflection, excuses, like quietness, and then what ends up happening is the manager's like, I gotta get the goal, so I just gotta go do this thing, right? Or the new leader, whereas what actually has to happen inside the team is the leader has to facilitate that awkward silence and sit in it and be like, all right, we're gonna sit here. As a team, that doesn't get us to the goal, nor does it empower anybody. And the whole thing around the leader is not to solve everything, it's to facilitate the discussion, to help people form plans, to help them think, and then eventually get them to understand that the end goal is this solution. I don't care what that looks like, but we have to get to this solution. How you do it, I don't care.
And when you've empowered them the right way, the great thing is where you can actually just sit back and watch that happen, right? Let them drive and lead each other, right? Because you've broken down those barriers, those relationship walls of them working in the box and understanding that those concentric circles overlap in such capacity.
Yeah.
Right? They're going, and you can kind of see it happen. And it just that snowball effect takes over.
Yeah. When you look at, this one's an interesting one, when you look at management, because I think you have to have some level of management leadership, but it doesn't need to be constrained, right? You need to manage process, system, and manage to an outcome. How someone goes about doing that, let them get creative, let them learn, let them do whatever they want. But when you see this one, thinks that individuals in the team would not be able to do things without their supervision. Well, that's a manager. Okay, great. I think what the challenge is that the manager probably doesn't have enough experience, or they don't know how to scale what they do. Like, I had a great mentor for me. I'm really good at numbers and projections and budgets, and I can like memorize numbers really easily. Well, I can rip off projections and budgets by looking at like 3 or 4 different things inside of like a business,
okay,
and give an accurate projection. Well, what my mentor at the time said to me was, pause, great job that you can do that, yet your gift can't be expounded upon because you're not actually slowing down enough to think through your synapses and your brain processes on how you got there. So how'd you do it? And like, I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, walk me through your first step, walk me through your second step. What he did was he slowed me down enough to say, like, yeah, Joe's got a gift, but that gift can actually be replicated, right? So the other side believes that the team members are capable of handling the most difficult situations and works to facilitate this, is that the leader has to say, like, I might have great experience, I might be a great individual. How do I pass that information that I've learned or gifted to somebody else so they can replicate it? Because I believe that once people know the best way to do it, understand the why, understand the how, and then they get that certain level of confidence. Because remember, part of leadership is that you got to deal with people's fears, right?
Yeah.
That training education is supposed to take away people's fear of failure, fear of looking bad, fear of messing up, right? That I have some level of common ground and concrete foundation that allows me to go out and be fearless. 10% of the population is fearless. You'd be like, tell me how to do it. I'm just going to do it, right?
Sure.
90% of the population has self-doubt, has confidence issues, has ego issues, and you have to work. This is probably and we're going to go down that rabbit hole. That is actually the biggest challenge in leadership, is you actually have to get people confident that they have value, that they know what they're doing. And the moment that they are not fearless is where they hunker back down, that you feel they can't do certain things. So the real question within the leader is, how do you give the skill sets and the experience and the actual on-the-job training to get somebody to have confidence so they become fearless? Because once someone's fearless, you can literally just give them a schematic and they're like, all right, you're telling me to do these 5 things and then do this 6th thing, and then what happens if this happens? You go, oh, yeah, you can try these 4 or 5 things, probably fix the problem. Hey, great, got it, and they go. So when you see somebody just literally always come to you and just say, tell me how to do it, and they go out and do it, it's because they're fearless inside of their pursuit for results, which means they have confidence, experience, all that kind of stuff. All of your challenges with getting a team member to get to the outcome or to grow or to implement something is because they have fear of something.
You know, it's interesting. You know, we worked through this list, and life experiences affect that every single day, right? And you can say, hey, you can be fearless, but you go from fearless to fearful based off of the experiences, right? You had that. You said, I'm energized, I show up and I go. But we were talking earlier about having the wrong person who becomes the micromanager, kind of sucks the life out of that person from a control level. Now you've turned that person who is innately fearless, right, willing to lead and generate and be productive, to then kind of question themselves and create a sense of insecurity, can completely send them off the wrong track.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's there's a lot of, one of the things in leadership is you got to be a really good coach. You know, I think you can give people processes and systems, and for the most part, sometimes they read it, sometimes they don't. You'll figure that one out. But I think in the leadership realm, giving people confidence is like the biggest key to success, because once they have confidence, they're willing to take risks because they know the outcome's not going to be that bad, or the repercussions not going to be, brain surgery type level of risk. And I think that's the thing that we have to constantly be checking is what level of confidence does the person have in this task, and how do I get them to have the confidence? And it doesn't mean I baby them. I might have to make them really, really uncomfortable, right? But kind of, I guess if you're running a marathon or you're doing like a triathlon, to train to do that is not a easy task. So why do we believe that certain tasks that are harder at work, we should be babying people or giving the path of least resistance and then expecting them to have this amazing outcome? I think it's flawed.
Well, awesome. Well, listen, everybody, thanks for joining us today on this episode of Entrepreneurial Impact. And if you've kind of noticed the theme of the last couple of weeks, we keep talking about leadership. We're talking about organization. We're talking about just how to lead people, get through to people. Because when we look at the outside events that are affecting us on our day-to-day lives, you kind of touched on that. Things that are going on with the economy, things that are going on overseas, things that are going on over Europe. How people are impacted day to day matter through how you're leading your life and leading your business. So we're going to continue down this path over the next couple of weeks of how to be a successful leadership, how to lead and work on your self-explanation, and what makes you successful. So thanks for joining us, everybody. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, appreciate it, Dave. Thanks.